It's the dead of night in 1943 England, where you're a crew member aboard a B-17 flying fortress, part of the Allied strategic bombing campaign to cripple Nazi Germany. As you climb the ladder into this hulking metal monster, the 4 Wright Cyclone engines erupt in a deafening roar, shaking your core like thunder in your chest. The biting cold pierces your heavy flight suit, while the pungent stench of aviation fuel clogs your nostrils, a harbinger of the -40-degree hell awaiting at 25,000 feet. Close your eyes now. Envision soaring over Europe's skies, absorbing real history through vivid tales that melt away daytime stress. This story is your escape. Gentle, immersive, designed to hush worries and lure you into deep, restful sleep. Dim the lights, feel the chill fade, and let's take flight together. You slip into the dim fuselage, the B-17's interior, a shadowed labyrinth of rivets and wires, where 10 souls are crammed into a shell barely larger than a modest home, yet vast enough to swallow your sense of self. Each man claims his station, not as a choice, but as a decree from the unforgiving gods of war. Positions that feel less like posts and more like individual sarcophagi, tailored to cradle you in isolation amid the collective hum of impending fate. The ball turret gunner, perhaps the most cursed among you, folds himself into that plexiglass orb dangling beneath the plane's belly, knees jammed against his chest in a cruel mimicry of the womb, his world reduced to a curved window on the abyss below. From there, he spins like a trapped marionette, scanning for shadows that could spell doom, knowing that escape requires a comrade's crank from above, if anyone survives long enough to help. Meanwhile, the waist gunners perch at their open ports, where the slipstream howls in at speeds that could flay skin, ice crystals forming ghostly veils on their goggles, turning every blink into a battle against blindness. And in the nose, the navigator and bombardier huddle behind, a fragile bubble of plexiglass, exposed like offerings to the sky, their charts and sights the only barriers between calculation and catastrophe. Privacy, in this flying coffin, dissolves into a bitter illusion, one that mocks the very notion of solitude even as it enforces it. Every breath you take, ragged and frost-laced, echoes through the intercom's static crackle, broadcast to the crew like unintended confessions in a confessional booth, wired for all to hear. A curse muttered under your mask, a sigh of exhaustion, even the subtle grind of teeth against the cold. They all travel those wires, binding you in an invisible web of shared vulnerability. Yet, paradoxically, you remain utterly alone in your cage of aluminum and duty, separated by bulkheads and the relentless drone that drowns personal thoughts. No walls shield your fears. Instead, the plane's skin, thin as a promise in wartime, amplifies them, turning whispers into communal echoes. You might glance toward the radio operator, hunched over his dials in the midsection, fingers dancing on keys that could summon rescue or reveal your position to the enemy. But his face is a mask of focus, distant as the English countryside you left behind. In those moments, you reflect quietly on how war strips away the luxury of unseen moments, leaving only this, a brotherhood forged in exposure, where even your heartbeat seems audible over the engines. Consider the tail gunner, isolated at the rear, staring backward into the slipstream as if guarding against ghosts from missions past. His perch is a lonely vigil, the plane's wake his only companion, whipping clouds into fleeting shapes that tease the eye with illusions of pursuit. Historically, these men of the 8th Air Force, drawn from farms in Iowa or streets in Brooklyn, trained in the relative safety of bases like Thorpe Abbot's, where briefings painted the B-17 as an invincible fortress. But reality, as you climb aboard, reveals the irony. This fortress is a fragile assembly of over 1 million rivets, designed by Boeing engineers in the late 1930s to withstand flak and fighters, yet vulnerable to a single well-placed shell. Over 12,000 of these beasts were built, each carrying 10 men into the fray, but survival hinged not on steel alone, but on the unspoken pact among you. Pilot steadying the yoke with hands that betray no tremor. Co-pilot scanning instruments like a seer reading omens. Engineer monitoring fuel lines that could turn triumph into tragedy with one leak. As you settle into your role, say, as a waist gunner, gripping the .50 caliber machine gun that feels like an extension of your frozen arms, the confinement presses in. A subtle reminder of how far removed this is from the ground-bound lives you once knew. Back home, space meant freedom. Wide fields or city blocks to wander. Here, it's a commodity rationed like oxygen. Each station a microcosm of endurance where movement is measured in inches, and stretching risks collision with a beam or a brother's elbow. The bombardier, peering through his northern sight, a marvel of precision engineering that Allied forces guarded like a state secret, might envy your relative mobility, confined as he is to that glass prow, where every enemy burst feels personal, the sky's vastness mocking his entrapment. And yet, in this shared constriction, a quiet resilience emerges, the kind that history books later laud as the backbone of the strategic bombing campaign, which dropped over 640,000 tons of explosives on German industry, hastening the war's end at the cost of 26,000 airmen lost. You can't help but ponder, in those hushed intervals before takeoff, how this setup mirrors the absurd theatre of existence itself. 10 men, each in his private vault, hurtling toward uncertainty, bound by threads of wire and will. The ball turret, that dangling sphere of vulnerability, invites a wry inward chuckle. At least, if the plane spirals down in flames, you're already curled up, ready to return to the Earth's embrace in the most compact form imaginable. A neat package for whatever awaits below. Such thoughts flicker like shadows on the bulkhead, born from the quiet desperation that war brews. Yet they steal you, turning dread into a companion rather than a foe. The navigator, plotting courses over maps dotted with flak zones, those deadly grids around targets like Berlin or Regensburg, shares this unspoken humor. His pencil scratches a defiant rhythm against the odds stacked by Luftwaffe aces. Transitioning from this enforced intimacy, you sense the plane's pulse quicken as the engines throttle up. The vibrations a prelude to the invisible adversaries lurking beyond the thin hull. The cold already nips at your extremities, a harbinger of the trials ahead, where noise will assault your senses and oxygen becomes a precious ally. But for now, in this suspended moment among your crew, you draw strength from the collective silence, a tapestry woven from individual threads of resolve. It's a resilience that echoes through time, reminding those who listen today, perhaps from the comfort of a quiet room, far from the roar, of the fragile line between survival and oblivion, and how, in facing it, those men forged a legacy of quiet heroism. You, too, in imagining their world, might find a subtle gratitude for the expanses of your own life, where space is not a luxury denied, but a gift often overlooked. The stations, though rigid, foster an odd camaraderie, one built on glances exchanged during pre-flight checks, or the shared nod when the bomb bay doors creak open for loading. The top turret gunner perched above like a sentinel in his rotating dome, surveys the formation with eyes trained to spot the glint of an approaching Focke-Wulf before it strikes. His isolation is vertical, a throne of vigilance amid the hum, where the plane's spine curves just enough to remind him of his perch's precariousness. Historically, these crews, averaging 25 years old, volunteered for the Army Air Forces, drawn by the allure of flight and the call to duty after Pearl Harbor, only to discover the grim arithmetic of attrition. For every mission completed, the odds tilted further against return. Yet, in your mind's eye, as you embody one of them, the confinement breeds not just fear, but a profound appreciation for the human spirit's adaptability. How, in the face of such compression, bonds form like steel under pressure. As the fortress taxis toward the runway, the weight of these private coffins settles deeper, a metaphorical shroud that wraps each man in his role. The radio operator, nestled amid his equipment, tunes frequencies that could mean salvation or betrayal, his headphones a barrier against the encroaching din. You feel the plane's frame groan slightly under the load of bombs and fuel, a subtle complaint that mirrors your own internal whispers. In this era of total war, where the B-17 became a symbol of American industrial might, over 12,731 produced by war's end, the human element remains the most fragile. And so, as takeoff looms, you brace not just for the ascent, but for the invisible chains that bind you to your brothers, each in his isolated realm, hurtling toward a sky that promises both glory and grave. The wry undercurrent lingers. In these coffins, at least you're not alone in your solitude, a paradox that, in its quiet absurdity, offers a sliver of solace amid the storm to come. As the B-17 claws its way upward, leaving the misty runways of East Anglia far below, the true adversaries begin to reveal themselves. Not the visible foes of flak or fighters, but the unseen spectres that stalk the crew from within the very air you breathe. The cold strikes first, an insidious thief that slithers through the seams of your electrically heated suit, turning the high-altitude realm into a frozen vault where temperatures plummet to minus 40 degrees Celsius, cold enough to seize metal and flesh alike. Your gloves, bulky and wired, hum faintly with current, yet they falter against the relentless assault. Touch a bare rivet, and the skin blisters in an instant, a burn born not of fire, but of ice's cruel embrace. In the annals of the 8th Air Force during the brutal Schweinfurt raids of 1943, where ball-bearing factories became graveyards for bombers, crews shivered uncontrollably despite these suits, their fingers numb to the point where triggers jammed not from mechanical failure, but from human frailty. You flex your hands now, feeling the stiffness creep in, a quiet reminder that survival hinges on layers that promise warmth, but deliver only a fragile truce with the void. Yet, this chill is no mere discomfort. It weaves into the fabric of your existence up here, transforming the plane into a glacial cocoon where every breath fogs your mask, and condensation beads on instruments like tears unshed. Imagine for a moment how this Arctic grip mirrors the isolation of modern solitude, those quiet nights when worries freeze your thoughts. Yet here, it demands a resilience that echoes through time, a testament to the airman's unyielding spirit in the face of nature's indifference. The heated suits, pioneered in the early 1940s by companies like General Electric, were meant to shield you, but failures were legend. A short circuit, and suddenly you're adrift in sub-zero torment, your body conserving heat by curling inward, much like the mind retreats from overwhelming dread. In reflections drawn from the diaries of men like Sergeant Marshal Haugen, who endured 50 such sorties, The cold became a companion, whispering doubts that tested the soul's endurance, forcing you to confront how thin the line is between control and surrender. Transitioning seamlessly from this frozen siege, the noise emerges as the second phantom, a ceaseless symphony of destruction that burrows into your skull like roots seeking soil in barren ground. The 4 Wright Cyclone engines thunder at over 100 decibels, a grinding roar that vibrates through your bones, drowning out the world until thought itself fragments under the onslaught. Short bursts of static from the intercom pierce through, voices distorted into metallic echoes, the only lifeline to your crewmates' presence amid the cacophony. Historically, this auditory barrage led to temporary deafness among veterans of the 303rd Bomb Group, where the Hells Angels Squadron logged missions that left ears ringing long after landing, a lingering scar from the skies over Ploesti or Munich. You strain to hear the pilot's calm directives, but the din mocks your efforts, turning communication into a game of fractured signals, where a missed word could spell catastrophe. And in those endless vibrations, a subtle irony surfaces in your mind. At least this relentless pulse mimics a heartbeat, proof that life persists even as it erodes your sanity. A desperate pulse in the emptiness that modern ears attuned to quieter distractions might envy for its raw insistence on being. This noise, unrelenting and omnipresent, fosters a peculiar detachment where the outside world fades into abstraction, leaving you to ponder the echoes of history's unyielding march. Pilots like those in the 100th Bomb Group, dubbed the Bloody 100th for their staggering losses, often described it as a veil that separated them from reality, a barrier that amplified inner turmoil while muffling the cries of falling comrades. You adjust your headset, the pressure adding to the headache brewing, and reflect on how this auditory prison cultivates endurance. Much like today's cacophony of daily stresses demands we tune out to survive. Yet, beneath the roar lies a deeper lesson. In embracing the chaos, those airmen honed a focus that turned desperation into defiance, their legacy a quiet rebuke to complacency. But lurking beyond the cold's grasp and the noise's assault is the most insidious foe. Anoxia, the silent reaper that steals your mind without a whisper. At 25,000 feet, where the B-17 cruises unpressurized to evade ground fire, the thin air starves your brain, turning clarity into confusion if your oxygen mask falters. A clog in the hose, perhaps from frozen moisture, and euphoria creeps in unbidden. Giggles bubble up irrationally, visions dance at the edges of sight, before blackout claims you. Crews of the famed Memphis Belle, immortalized in wartime documentaries, reported such hallucinations during their 25-mission tour, where one gunner swore he saw phantom squadrons joining formation, only to realize his mask had slipped. You check yours obsessively now, fingers tracing the rubber seal, feeling the steady flow that keeps delirium at bay. A ritual born from the knowledge that anoxia strikes without mercy, transforming warriors into unwitting fools. In Haugen's accounts, this obsession became a mantra, the sensation of brain melting like ice cream under a relentless sun, a metaphor for the gradual unraveling that high-altitude warfare imposed. This oxygen deprivation, a byproduct of the B-17's design, unpressurized to save weight and allow for bomb loads exceeding 4,000 pounds, underscored the era's brutal calculus. Fly high to survive flak, but risk your very essence in the process. You inhale deeply, the metallic tang of the mask a reassuring bite, and in that breath, a fleeting thought arises. At least, if anoxia takes hold, you depart laughing, an eternal grin etched against the clouds. a final jest in the face of oblivion's embrace. Such musings, emerging from the depths of quiet despair, highlight the human capacity to find levity in lethality, a trait that propelled these men through the combined bomber offensive, where over 47,000 airmen perished, their sacrifices paving the path to victory. Today, as you immerse yourself in their world, this invisible trio, cold, noise, anoxia, serves as a bridge to gratitude, reminding us how their fortitude amid such phantoms forged the freedoms we often take for granted, a subtle valor that whispers across generations. These enemies, woven into the tapestry of each mission, demand a vigilance that transcends the physical, sculpting the psyche in ways profound and unspoken. The cold numbs not just limbs but resolve, yet in resisting it, you uncover layers of inner strength. The noise isolates while connecting through shared endurance. Anoxia threatens the mind's sanctity, forcing a hyper-awareness that sharpens survival instincts. From the 384th Bomb Group's logs, where raids on synthetic oil plants like Luna exacted heavy tolls, emerged tales of crews who, despite these spectres, maintained formation, their discipline a beacon against the encroaching dark. You, embodying their vigil, feel the weight of this inheritance, a call to honor the past by embracing the present's relative warmth, where stresses pale against the skies they braved. As the altitude stabilizes, these invisible foes linger, not as conquerors, but as teachers, imparting lessons in resilience that echo softly, inviting reflection on how far we've come from those frozen heights. Amid the ceaseless thrum of the engines, as the B-17 levels out in its ascent, the demands of the body assert themselves with a quiet insistence, transforming the most primal acts into ordeals of endurance that test the limits of human frailty. Up here, where the world below shrinks to an abstract patchwork of greens and greys, survival isn't merely about dodging bullets or bombs. It's a subtle war waged against the very elements that sustain life, where water, food, and even the urge to relieve oneself become pawns in a game rigged by altitude and isolation. The relief tube, that rudimentary contraption, a simple funnel connected to a hose venting outside the fuselage, stands as a mocking sentinel to necessity, often frozen solid in the sub-zero grip of the upper atmosphere, rendering it as useless as a promise whispered to the wind. You fumble with it in desperation, the cold metal biting through your gloves, only to find the flow halted by ice, forcing a grim choice. Endure the mounting pressure or risk soiling the flight suit that already clings like a second sweat-soaked skin. In the logs of crews from the 91st Bomb Group, who flew the infamous ragged irregulars over targets like Hamburg, such mishaps were commonplace, leading to hushed humiliations that bound men in shared silence, their dignity eroded not by enemy fire, but by the sky's indifferent cruelty. This battle for bodily control unfolds in a realm where every drop of moisture is precious, yet paradoxically treacherous, as the high-altitude dryness parches your throat, while condensation from your breath gathers in insidious pools within the mask. Water, stored in canteens strapped to your station, often transforms into slabs of ice, unyielding to thirsty lips until thawed by body heat, or the faint warmth of an electrical pad, if it functions. You sip sparingly, rationing each swallow as if it were the last, aware that dehydration creeps like a shadow, dulling reflexes and clouding judgment in a domain where clarity means life. Food fares no better. The rations, tucked into pockets or small compartments, consist of chocolate bars hardened to stone-like consistency or sandwiches that freeze mid-bite, their fillings congealed into unappetizing masses that you gnaw through chattering teeth, the act more mechanical than nourishing. From the recollections of bombardiers in the 381st Bomb Group, stationed at Ridgewell, these meagre provisions, intended to sustain 8 to 10 hour sorties, often went untouched, the cold suppressing appetite until nausea from the plane's sway took hold, turning sustenance into a reluctant ritual. Hygiene, that cornerstone of grounded existence, evaporates into a distant reverie up here, where the notion of cleanliness mocks the grime that accumulates unchecked. You wipe your face with a gloved hand, smearing streaks of oil and sweat across skin that's already chapped and raw from the oxygen mask's unrelenting seal, which rubs like sandpaper with every shift of the head. Beards sprout unevenly beneath the rubber, patchy and unkempt, a testament to the impossibility of shaving in a vibrating tin can, where a razor would sooner draw blood than groom. Showers are myths from base life. Instead, you endure the itch of unwashed layers, the flight suit growing heavier with accumulated filth, a second epidermis that whispers of decay. In the broader sweep of the air war, as chronicled in the after-action reports of the 15th Air Force operating from Italy, crews returned from raids over Ploesti oil fields with uniforms stiffened by salt and dirt, their bodies bearing the invisible scars of neglect that compounded the psychological toll, reminding how war strips away not just lives, but the small dignities that anchor humanity. Yet, in this aerial asceticism, a profound irony emerges, one that flickers in your thoughts like a dim bulb in the cockpit. At least, with the relief tube iced over, you're conserving water in the most absurd economy, a thrift born of necessity that borders on the macabre, saving precious fluids for the engines rather than your own relief. Such reflections arising unbidden from the depths of quiet exasperation underscore the resilience required to press on, transforming deprivation into a forge for fortitude. The Army Air Force's medical studies from 1944 noted how these deprivations led to chronic fatigue among crews, with weight loss averaging 10 pounds per tour. Yet they soldiered through, their adaptability a quiet rebuke to the comforts of later eras, where abundance often dulls the appreciation for basics. Linking these struggles is the ever-present spectre of the environment itself, which conspires against every need, turning the B-17 into a floating monastery of denial, where indulgence is a forgotten vice. Thirst gnaws persistently. The canteen's frozen contents are tantalizing teas that you warm against your chest, feeling the slow melt as a minor victory amid the larger siege. Meals, when attempted, become communal in their sparsity. A shared chocolate bar passed hand to hand, its brittle snap echoing faintly over the intercom, a brief communion that binds you to your fellows in mutual hunger. Historically, during the intense phase of Operation Point Blank in 1943-1944, when B-17s targeted aircraft factories in Regensburg, crews subsisted on these scant supplies, their metabolism slowed by the cold, yet driven by a determination that history reveres as the backbone of the daylight bombing doctrine, which ultimately crippled the Luftwaffe's production at the cost of over 4,000 fortresses lost. This orchestration of denial fosters a meditative state, where the body's protests fade into a background hum, inviting introspection on the fragility of existence. You ponder, in those suspended moments, how these hardships mirror the internal voids of modern life, empty calories of distraction filling days, while here, every bite and sip is earned, a lesson in mindfulness that those airmen embodied without choice. The Bombardier's log from the 390th Bomb Group recounts instances where frozen rations led to improvised thaws using heated gun barrels, an ingenuity born from desperation that highlights the era's unyielding innovation. And as you chew a thawed morsel, the flavor muted by altitude's theft of taste, a subtle undercurrent surfaces. Perhaps, in this starvation of senses, you're being purified, stripped to essentials in a way that ground-bound souls rarely experience, a baptism by deprivation that tempers the spirit for the trials ahead. Ultimately, these survival needs weave into the mission's tapestry, a subtle undercurrent that amplifies the heroism of persistence. The 8th Air Force's casualty figures, nearly 47,000 men killed, wounded or missing, speak not just to combat losses, but to the cumulative erosion from such privations. Yet the survivors' tales, like those of the Lucky Bastard Club, who completed their tours, celebrate the triumph of will over want. You, immersed in their skyward vigil, feel the echo of that strength, a gentle nudge toward gratitude for the abundances of today, where a warm meal or simple relief is a given, not a gamble against the elements. As the plane drones onward, these quiet battles remind us that true fortitude lies in the mundane conquests, the unspoken victories that sustain the soul through the storm. As the formation tightens, slicing through the ether like a flock of steel birds bound by invisible tethers, the true inferno ignites, not in flames at first, but in the sudden bloom of black clouds that erupt across the sky, harbingers of the ground's wrath reaching up to claim you. Flak, that anti-aircraft artillery spewed from German 80mm guns below, transforms the serene blue expanse into a canvas of chaos. Each burst a dark puff that belches forth shrapnel like thorns from a poisoned rose, tearing at the B-17's fragile aluminum hide with the indifference of a storm ravaging a leaf. The sound assaults you first, a sharp crackle like hail pelting a tin roof, amplified through the hull until it resonates in your teeth, the plane shuddering as fragments ping and puncture, sometimes harmlessly, other times slicing wires or flesh with surgical malice. You grip your station tighter, heart sinking with the erratic jolts, feeling the fortress buck like a living thing wounded yet defiant, its wings flexing under the barrage as if protesting the violation. In those moments, as the air fills with the acrid scent of cordite drifting through vents, you sense the sky's betrayal. What was once a vast refuge now conspires with the earth to ensnare you, a cosmic irony that whispers of how freedom's illusion crumbles under fire. The explosions come in patterns, waves orchestrated by unseen batteries on the ground, their radar-guided precision a testament to the escalating arms race that defined the air war over Europe. During the infamous Black Thursday raid on Schweinfurt in October 1943, when the 8th Air Force hurled nearly 300 B-17s at ball-bearing plants crucial to the Nazi war machine, 60 fortresses vanished in this deadly haze, their crews, young men from places like Kansas farms or Chicago factories, swallowed by the puffs that bloomed like fatal flowers. You imagine it now, the lead plane vanishing in a mid-air blossom, debris raining down as a grim confetti, forcing the formation to close ranks, each survivor wondering if their turn lurks in the next salvo. Yet, amid the terror, a quiet resolve hardens. You swing your .50 caliber gun, numb fingers thawing just enough to track the invisible threats, knowing that to falter is to invite the end. The shrapnel's whine, that high-pitched scream as it whizzes past, embeds itself in memory, a soundtrack to the U-bend of fate, where one shard could end it all, leaving you to reflect inwardly on the absurdity. At least, if a piece finds you, it might grant the quickest exit from this aerial purgatory, a view straight down to whatever lies beneath the clouds. Transitioning from the ground's fury, the fighters arrived like spectres materializing from the sun's glare. Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s diving with predatory grace, their cannons spitting tracers that arc through the air like glowing serpents hungry for flesh. The intercom crackles to life. Bandits at 3 o'clock high. And suddenly the world narrows to the swivel of your turret, the kick of the guns as you unleash bursts of lead, the recoil jarring your shoulders like a vengeful echo of the engine's roar. Orange streaks zip past, some harmlessly tracing the sky, others thudding into the wing with a sickening crunch, fuel leaking in misty trails that ignite into fleeting comets. The plane lists slightly, the pilot wrestling the controls to maintain formation, while you track a 109 banking sharply, its pilot a faceless shadow in the cockpit, both of you locked in this intimate dance of destruction. Historically, these Luftwaffe aces, honed in the skies over Spain and France, claimed thousands of Allied bombers, their tactics evolving from head-on assaults to rocket barrages by 1944, as the German High Command desperately countered the relentless daylight offensives that pounded factories in places like Leipzig and Bremen. In the heat of it, as tracers weave a deadly lattice around the fortress, you feel the surge of adrenaline mingled with a profound weariness, the body's betrayal in the face of unending assault. The waist gunner's position, exposed to the slipstream's howl, becomes a vortex of wind and fire, ice forming on barrels even as they heat from sustained bursts, the spent casings clattering like brass rain on the floor. You hear the ball turret gunner below, his voice strained over the comms, calling out positions with mechanical precision, his plexiglass cocoon a fragile barrier against the onslaught. One hit there, and the sphere shatters like a dropped crystal, the gunner tumbling into the void, a fate that befell dozens in raids like the one over Münster, where entire crews plummeted without parachutes, their chutes stowed elsewhere in the plane's cramped confines. Yet, in this maelstrom, bonds tighten. A shared glance through the fuselage, or a pilot's steady assurance, weaves a thread of camaraderie that defies the isolation, reminding how, in the crucible of combat, humanity clings to fragments of connection. This aerial ballet of death, where fighters loop and roll like avenging angels, underscores the war's merciless arithmetic. For every B-17 that limps home riddled with holes, over 4,700 lost in combat, the cost in lives mounted, with survival rates dipping below 30% in the bloodiest months of 1943. You ponder it amid the chaos, the plane's frame groaning under evasive maneuvers, evoking a subtle musing born from the edge. With fighters swarming like persistent suitors, at least rejection comes swiftly. A courtship ended in flames rather than the slow courtship of doubt on quieter nights. Such thoughts, fleeting as a tracer's glow, emerge from the well of quiet despair, highlighting the resilience that propelled these men forward, their valor a bridge to our era's relative safety, where conflicts are often abstracted, distant echoes rather than visceral storms. As the engagement wanes, the surviving fighters peeling away to lick their wounds or pursue stragglers, the fortress presses on, scarred but unbowed, the air thick with the scent of gunpowder and fear sweat. The formation, now pockmarked with gaps where comrades once flew, tightens instinctively, a living organism adapting to loss. You scan the horizon, heart still racing, the adrenaline's ebb leaving a hollow ache, a reminder of the toll exacted not just on machines, but on minds. In reflections from veterans like those of the 385th Bomb Group, who endured the double strike missions over Regensburg-Schweinfurt, The fighters' assaults forged unbreakable wills, their survival a testament to ingenuity, jettisoning weight, weaving through fire, that history honors as pivotal to cracking the Third Reich's industrial spine. Today, as you dwell in their suspended peril, this chapter of fury invites gratitude for the grounded peace we inhabit, where the sky's threats are mere clouds, not harbingers of hell. The aftermath lingers, the plane's vibrations a soothing counterpoint to the earlier violence, allowing space for introspection on how these encounters, though terrifying, distilled essence from existence, stripping illusions to reveal raw tenacity. The dark puffs fade behind, but their memory clings like frost on a canopy, a spectral reminder that in the dance with death, every evasion is a quiet victory, every continuation a defiance of the inevitable. You exhale slowly, the mask fogging briefly, and in that breath, the war's grim poetry unfolds. Fighters and flak as metaphors for life's unseen ambushes, met not with surrender, but with the unyielding grip on controls, a legacy that whispers across decades, urging appreciation for the calm intervals we too often overlook. As the target draws nearer, these invisible scars deepen, preparing you for the climax yet to come, in a sky that forgives nothing but forgets even less. As the echoes of the skirmish fade into the distance, the B-17 settles into a deceptive calm, cruising through an endless expanse where the world below dissolves into a uniform sea of cottony white, the clouds stretching like forgotten dreams under the relentless blue vault above. The hours stretch ahead, unyielding and monotonous, each minute a slow drip in the vast hourglass of the mission, where the true adversary isn't the sharp burst of combat, but the grinding weight of waiting, a stillness that presses heavier than any explosion. Your eyes, already strained from scanning the horizon for glints of metal, begin to ache with the futility of it all. The dials blur slightly, the wings of your fortress extending like weary arms into the nothingness, while your fingers, cramped around the gun grips, twitch with idle tension, as if protesting the absence of purpose. The engine's drone, once a ferocious roar, mellows into a hypnotic lullaby that you fight against, eyelids growing heavy in the sterile light filtering through the canopy, tempting you toward a slumber that could prove fatal if vigilance slips. This monotony, woven into the fabric of every long-haul sortie from bases like Grafton Underwood, where the 384th Bomb Group launched their assaults on distant targets, becomes a silent eroder of the spirit, more insidious than the visible threats that punctuate the journey. Missions to Berlin or beyond, spanning up to 10 grueling hours round trip, demanded this endurance from crews who crossed the channel under radio silence, their formations a fragile lattice against the empty sky. You stare out, mind wandering to fragments of home, a kitchen table back in Ohio perhaps, or the laughter of siblings now distant echoes, only to snap back as a shadow flits across the clouds, heart racing until it reveals itself as mere illusion, the vastness playing tricks on weary senses. In the journals of navigators from the 306th Bomb Group, this interminable vigil often led to a peculiar introspection, where the blank canvas of the sky invited unwanted reflections on mortality, the plane's steady hum a metronome counting down to the inevitable return of peril. Yet, in this suspended void, where time loses its edges and blends into a hazy continuum, a subtle irony surfaces amid the quiet despair. The silence up here is so profoundly deadly that even the enemy must grow bored waiting for you, lurking somewhere in the haze like impatient guests at an unending party. Such thoughts drift unbidden, a fleeting balm against the ennui that grinds finer than any flak, turning hours into eternities where the mind, deprived of stimulus, begins to fabricate its own phantoms, whispers of doubt, visions of what-ifs that swirl like eddies in the slipstream. The fortress, engineered for endurance with its massive fuel tanks, allowing ranges over 2,000 miles, becomes both sanctuary and prison in these stretches, its vibrations a constant companion that lulls yet alerts, reminding how the war's rhythm alternates between frenzy and famine, each extreme forging the crew's mettle in different fires, linking this aerial limbo to the broader narrative of the air campaign, where the combined bomber offensive aimed to dismantle the Reich's infrastructure through persistent daylight raids, reveals how these quiet intervals tested resolve as much as the battles did. Crews like those aboard the Thunderbird in the 303rd Bomb Group, who logged over 100 missions, spoke in post-war interviews of how the tedium bred a meditative resilience, a forced mindfulness where scanning the empty quadrants honed instincts sharper than any training manual could. You feel it now, the subtle shift from anxiety to a numb acceptance, eyes darting mechanically while thoughts meander through personal labyrinths, the face of a sweetheart in a faded photo tucked in your jacket, or the simple warmth of a bed untouched for weeks. This detachment, born from the sky's blank indifference, mirrors the distractions of later lives where endless scrolling numbs the soul, yet here it served a purpose, preserving sanity for the storm's return, a quiet fortitude that history salutes as the unsung backbone of victory. The drone persists, a low throb that seeps into your bones, making the cramped station feel even smaller, the air thicker with unspoken fatigue. Fingers cramp further, releasing only to flex in futile relief, while the vast blue presses in from above, a dome of isolation that amplifies inner echoes. In this expanse, where Europe unfolds unseen below like a crumpled map, the waiting becomes a teacher of patience, each passing mile a lesson in surrender to the inevitable. Target approach, bomb run, the gauntlet home. From the perspectives of waist gunners in the 92nd Bomb Group, who endured the long hauls to submarine pens in Bremen, this stillness often invited games of mental diversion. Counting rivets on the bulkhead or imagining shapes in the clouds, childish pursuits that mask the underlying dread of what lurked beyond the horizon. You join them inwardly, tracing patterns in the vapor trails left by the lead planes, a fleeting distraction that softens the edge of anticipation, turning boredom into a fragile ally against the encroaching fear. As the formation drones onward, the monotony deepens, a velvet glove over the iron fist of war, where the absence of action breeds its own terror, the fear that complacency will dull your edge when the sky erupts anew. The engine's hum, steady as a heartbeat, lulls you toward introspection on the war's grand design. How these interminable flights, part of the strategic push that saw over 1.5 million tons of bombs dropped by war's end, relied on crews who mastered the art of watchful idleness, their vigilance a shield against the void's subtle erosion. You reflect on how this mirrors contemporary lulls, those pauses in daily frenzy where anxiety simmers unchecked. Yet those airmen transformed it into strength, their legacy a whisper of encouragement to find purpose in the pause. The clouds part occasionally, revealing glimpses of the continent below, rivers like silver threads, cities as smudges, reminders that the world continues oblivious to your suspended vigil, a poignant contrast that stirs a melancholic empathy for lives intertwined with such vast indifference. In the end, this deadly stillness, far from a respite, becomes the mission's hidden crucible, forging bonds through shared endurance and quiet revelations. The 457th Bomb Group's accounts from Glatton Airfield detail how these hours cultivated a profound camaraderie, unspoken pacts sealed in the act of simply persisting together against the tedium's tide. You sense it building, the crew's collective breath held in rhythm with the props, a unity born from isolation that defies the sky's attempts to divide. As the target looms ever closer on the navigator's chart, the monotony yields its grip, leaving behind a tempered resolve, a quiet valor that history weaves into the narrative of triumph over tyranny. Today, as you dwell in their ethereal limbo, this chapter invites a gentle reckoning with your own quiet moments, honoring the airman's legacy by embracing the present's relative serenity, where waiting is not a curse but a space for renewal. The drone continues, a soothing undercurrent now, carrying you forward into the gathering storm, where stillness gives way to fury once more. Beyond the tangible assaults of cold and clamour, as the B-17 hums through the boundless azure, a deeper shadow unfurls within you. Not the claustrophobic crush of enclosed spaces, but its inverse, a vast, swallowing emptiness that stretches infinitely in every direction, turning the sky into an indifferent moor where your fortress drifts like a mote in a godless eye. Agoraphobia, they might call it in quieter times, this terror of the open, where the absence of walls becomes a prison without bars, the horizon a mocking illusion of escape that only amplifies your exposure. The plane, lumbering at 200 miles per hour, feels suddenly minuscule against the expanse, its wings mere whispers against the wind, a slow-moving speck vulnerable to unseen gazes from below or above, where no cover exists save the fragile veil of clouds that part like traitorous curtains at the worst moments. You grip the frame of your station, knuckles whitening beneath gloves, heart echoing the subtle creaks of the airframe as if the void itself presses in, reminding you that here, in this elevated limbo, you're not hidden but spotlighted, a deliberate target in a theatre where the audience wields cannons and radar. This fear seeps in gradually, like ink bleeding through parchment, born from the realization that the B-17, for all its armored legend, is but a thin-skinned vessel adrift in immensity, its aluminum shell, barely a quarter-inch thick in places, no match for the infinite drop below or the predatory dives from on high. During the grueling campaigns of 1943, when the 8th Air Force's unescorted raids pushed deep into Reich territory, crews like those in the 100th Bomb Group grappled with this dread daily, their formations etched against the sky like invitations to slaughter, with survival rates hovering perilously around 25% in the early tours, each mission a roll of cosmic dice where the house always held the edge. You scan the emptiness now, eyes darting to shadows that resolve into nothing, the vastness amplifying every jolt, a turbulence-born shudder or a distant vapor trail into potential omens, fostering a paranoia that whispers of being watched, judged by forces as impersonal as the stars wheeling overhead in the rare clear nights. In this endless void, where Europe sprawls unseen beneath layers of white, the psychological burden manifests as a quiet unraveling. Threads of sanity fraying under the weight of exposure that offers no recess, no corner to retreat. The navigator's charts, plotting courses over flak-heavy zones like the Ruhr Valley, dubbed Happy Valley in bitter irony by the crews, provide cold comfort, mere lines on paper against the reality of being naked to the elements and enemies alike. You feel it viscerally, the skin prickling as if the thin walls dissolve, leaving you suspended in raw vulnerability, the 25,000-foot plummet a constant companion in your peripheral thoughts, a yawning invitation that tugs at the edges of composure. Historically, veterans from the 305th Bomb Group, who flew the perilous paths to Wilhelmshaven, described this as a sky sickness, where the openness induced vertigo of the soul. Guilt compounding the fear as sister ships vanished into the blue, their fates unknown but imagined in vivid, haunting detail. Plunging spirals, silent screams lost to the wind. Yet, amid this expansive terror, a subtle undercurrent arises, born from the depths of hushed resignation. With the sky so overwhelmingly large and you so insignificantly small, at least a fall would make you a shooting star, a brief blaze across the firmament for some ground-bound observer to wish upon, oblivious to the irony of your extinguished light granting another's hope. Such musings flicker like distant lightning, emerging unforced from the well of quiet desperation, adding a layer of poignant absurdity to the dread that clings like frost on the canopy. The plane's gentle sway, a rhythmic cradle in the currents, invites these reflections, turning the void into a mirror for inner landscapes, where fears of the external echo personal voids, regrets left unspoken, letters unwritten, amplifying the isolation even as the crew shares the same fate-bound vessel. Linking this psychological expanse to the war's inexorable grind, where the strategic bombing doctrine demanded these deep penetrations without fighter escort until the P-51 Mustangs arrived in late 1943, reveals how such burdens forged an unyielding camaraderie, bonds tempered in the fire of mutual exposure. Pilots like those commanding the Piccadilly Lily in the 390th Bomb Group maintained stoic facades, their steady hands on the yoke of bulwark against the crew's creeping unease, yet inwardly wrestling with the same spectral vastness that threatened to engulf them all. You sense it building, the fear not as a paralyzing force, but as a sharpening one, honing instincts to a razor's edge, where every anomaly, a glint on the horizon or an unexplained vibration, demands instant scrutiny, the mind's defense against the abyss's pull. This mental vigilance, a product of the era's unforgiving arithmetic, with over half of some groups' crews failing to complete their 25 mission quotas, cultivated a profound inner strength, a legacy that whispers across time, urging recognition of how modern anxieties, though different, pale against this celestial trial, fostering gratitude for the grounded certainties we navigate today. As the mission wears on, the void's grip loosens in fleeting moments. A joke crackled over the intercom, or the shared ritual of checking oxygen lines, small anchors that tether you to the present, defying the expanse's attempt to dilute your resolve. The bombardier, focused on his northern sight, a classified marvel that promised precision amid the chaos, might envy your gunner's perch for its illusory activity, yet shares the same undercurrent of dread, the sky's infinity a constant reminder of fragility. In post-war memoirs from survivors like those of the 447th Bomb Group, this fear evolved into a philosophical acceptance, viewing the void not as enemy, but as a teacher, imparting lessons in humility and perseverance that grounded their post-war lives. You embody it now, breath steadying against the mask, the endless blue a canvas for contemplation on existence's precarious balance, where exposure breeds not just terror, but a deeper appreciation for connection, however tenuous. In essence, this fear of the endless void encapsulates the air war's profound irony. Thrust into openness to conquer confinement on the ground, only to discover that true imprisonment lies in the mind's response to boundlessness. The B-17, symbol of American might, with its production peaking at over 300 per month by 1944, carried crews who mastered this internal frontier, their fortitude pivotal in eroding the Luftwaffe's dominance through sheer persistence. As you drift in their wake, the narrative invites a gentle parallel to contemporary expanses, digital voids or emotional distances, highlighting how their conquest of the sky's terror offers timeless wisdom. In facing the infinite, we uncover our finite strengths, a quiet valor that resonates, fostering empathy for those who soared so we might stand firm. The clouds shift below, the void persists, but within it, a subtle peace emerges, a breath drawn deeper in acknowledgement of survival's delicate thread. In the fragile geometry of the sky, as the B-17 slots into its place within the combat box, a meticulously arranged phalanx of bombers, where each plane's guns interlock like the teeth of a celestial beast, the doctrine of discipline descends like an unbreakable covenant, binding you not just to your station, but to the inexorable logic of collective survival. The formation, a box in name but a living lattice in practice, demands absolute adherence. Stray from its embrace, and you become the isolated prey, easy pickings for the wolves circling below the clouds. You feel it in the subtle adjustments of the pilot's hands, the yoke trembling faintly as he maintains position off the lead ship's wing, the distance measured in mere yards that could spell salvation or doom. This isn't mere order. It's a fatal arithmetic, forged in the war rooms of the 8th Air Force, where strategists like General Curtis LeMay decreed that strength lay in unity. The overlapping fields of fire from 50 caliber mounts creating a hedge of lead against the onslaught. Yet, as you peer through the frost-rimed window, the box reveals its cruel poetry. A human construct etched against the void, fragile as a spider's web in a gale, where deviation invites not reprimand, but annihilation. The command echoes through the intercom, calm yet unyielding. Hold formation. A mantra that overrides instinct, even as the sky erupts around a sister ship, flames licking its fuselage like hungry tongues devouring a sacrifice. You watch, transfixed, the stricken fortress listing sideways, black smoke trailing like a funeral shroud, the men inside, faceless kin from the same briefing room, silhouetted briefly against the blaze before the radio crackles with their cries, fading into static that swallows words like bail out or God help us. The order stands firm. No swerving to assist, no heroic dive to shield. To break rank is to weaken the whole, inviting the fighters to exploit the gap like shadows slipping through a cracked door. Guilt coils in your gut, a slow burning ember as the burning plane spirals downward, a fiery comet streaking toward the indifferent earth, its 10 souls consigned to the statistics of war, perhaps among the 376 aircraft lost in the brutal Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission of August 1943, where the unescorted boxes face slaughter, 60 bombers vanishing in a single day, their crews' fates etched in terse after-action reports as missing in action. This discipline, imposed with the weight of destiny, transforms the sky into a theatre of restrained tragedy, where choices aren't yours to make but decrees from higher echelons, the general's maps blind to the human cost scrawled in smoke trails. You reflect inwardly on the absurdity, a thought bubbling from the quiet abyss of resignation. With orders to abandon the falling to their fireworks display, at least their exit lights up the sky, a brief spectacle in an otherwise monotonous act, granting the survivors a momentary distraction from their own precarious perch. Such notions flicker unbidden, born from the depths where despair crafts its own armor, shielding the mind from the raw ache of impotence. The pilot's voice, steady as forged steel, reaffirms the hold, his hands, perhaps trembling beneath the gloves, guiding the fortress back into alignment, the formation closing like a wound healing over loss, each remaining plane a testament to the doctrine's cold efficacy. Linking this rigid structure to the broader canvas of the air offensive, where the combined bomber offensive sought to erode the Reich's sinews through precision daylight strikes, reveals how the combat box evolved from necessity, its layered stacks, high-low lead squadrons, maximizing defensive fire while minimizing exposure, a brainchild of tacticians who balanced lives against industrial targets like oil refineries in Ploesti or aircraft plants in Wiener Neustadt. Yet, in execution, it demanded a stoicism that bordered on the inhuman. Witnessing the bloody 100th Group's decimation in 1943, where entire elements evaporated under Luftwaffe assaults, crews learned to compartmentalize grief, filing it away like unused ammunition, lest it fracture the box's integrity. You embody this now, breath shallow against the mask, eyes averted from the empty slot where comrades once flew. The guilt, a persistent undercurrent that sharpens focus rather than dulls it, turning personal loss into fuel for persistence. The formation's hold becomes a metaphor for the war's inexorable pull, a chain that links individual fates to the collective, where mercy for one jeopardizes all, echoing the harsh pragmatism that defined the era's aerial doctrine. In the memoirs of co-pilots from the 95th Bomb Group, who endured the Big B raids over Berlin in 1944, this discipline manifested as a silent pact. Acknowledge the fallen with a nod, then press on, the box reforming like a scarred organism adapting to amputation. You sense the weight of it, the command not just tactical, but existential, forcing a confrontation with morality's grey edges, save the mission or the man, where the answer, dictated from afar, leaves scars that time barely fades. Amid the drone, a subtle musing arises, in clinging to formation like drowning men to driftwood. Perhaps you're all already ghosts, haunting the sky in perfect order. A parade of the damned where breaking rank might offer the only true freedom, fleeting as a plunge through clouds. This enforced unity, while salvaging missions that cumulatively dropped over 1 million tons of ordnance on Axis strongholds, exacted a psychological toll that rippled through post-war lives, veterans grappling with the ghosts of those left behind, their decisions haunted by what-ifs whispered in quiet nights. You carry it forward, the box's geometry a cage of necessity, fostering a resilience that transcends the immediate terror, a quiet fortitude where guilt tempers rather than breaks. Compared to contemporary binds, obligations that chain us to routines, ignoring the stragglers in our midst, this aerial imperative highlights the airmen's profound sacrifice, their adherence a beacon of duty that illuminated victory's path, even as it shadowed their souls. As the target nears, the formation holds, a testament to human will sculpted by necessity, inviting empathy for those who navigated such moral voids, and gratitude for eras where choices, though fraught, allow room for compassion. The sky, vast and unyielding, absorbs the formation's scars, the empty positions like voids in a constellation. Each absence a story truncated mid-sentence. You ponder the pilot's burden, their orders relayed from brass who viewed the box as chess pieces on a board spanning continents, blind to the visceral cost. The radio's final static, a comrade's chute blooming too late, drifting like a lost petal into enemy territory. This discipline, unyielding as gravity, cultivated a fatalistic grace, where acceptance of the inevitable became armor against despair, a mindset that propelled the offensive through its bloodiest phases, from the unescorted deep strikes of 1943 to the escorted sweeps of 1945, when P-51s finally tilted the scales. In your immersion, the hold feels predestined, a thread in history's weave that honors the fallen by pressing on. Their legacy a subtle rebuke to fragmentation, urging unity in our own divided times. As flak looms on the horizon, the command reverberates inwardly, an anchor in the storm, where holding formation isn't a choice but destiny. The guilt, a companion that deepens rather than diminishes resolve. The box endures, scarred yet coherent, a microcosm of the war's grand design, where individual sorrows fuel the greater push toward dawn. You exhale, mask fogging briefly, the wry undercurrent lingering. In this perfect alignment of doom, at least the view is shared, a collective gaze into the abyss that stares back with impartial hunger. The engines thrum on, carrying you deeper. The formations hold a silent vow that echoes through the ages, inviting reflection on how such bonds, forged in fire, endure beyond the clouds. Within the humming confines of the B-17, as the mission's rhythm settles into a precarious equilibrium, subtler phantoms begin to stir. Not the external spectres of steel and fire, but the inner wraiths that haunt the mind, born from the ceaseless grind of nerves stretched taut across the expanse. These ghosts manifest in the small talismans clutched in pockets or taped to consoles. A rabbit's foot, fur worn smooth from anxious fingers, or a faded photograph of a loved one, its edges curled like a leaf in autumn, serving as anchors against the drift into madness. You finger yours now, a simple locket perhaps, its weight a faint reassurance amid the vibrations that rattle through the frame, turning every creak into a premonition of fracture, every unexplained shudder a whisper from the plane's weary bones. The cockpit, that nerve center where dials glow like watchful eyes in the dim light, becomes a breeding ground for these apparitions, where the stress of sustained altitude warps perceptions, making the familiar strange and the benign ominous. Superstitions bloom like fungi in damp shadows, rituals performed with the solemnity of ancient rites, tapping the gun barrels 3 times before engaging, or whispering a childhood prayer backward to ward off the ill-fated burst. These acts, irrational yet indispensable, weave a fragile net over the abyss of uncertainty, a quiet defiance against the statistical Grim Reaper that claimed over half the crews in groups like the 100th Bomb Group during their bloodiest stretches in 1943-1944. You participate without question, the tap-tap-tap, a rhythmic counterpoint to the engine's drone, feeling the collective pulse of the crew sink in these unspoken ceremonies, each man his own shaman, in a temple of aluminum and rivets. Yet, beneath the surface, tempers simmer like fuel lines under pressure, flaring over the intercom in sharp bursts, a snapped retort at a missed enemy call-out, or a curse hurled at a jammed feed belt that refuses to yield, the words echoing like accusations in a courtroom of the damned. This fraying of bonds, subtle at first, deepens the cockpit's haunting, turning brothers forged in briefing rooms into wary strangers, their glances laden with unspoken judgments amid the static haze. The radio operator's hesitant transmission, perhaps delayed by a frozen finger, draws ire from the navigator, his map-stained hands gesturing futilely in the cramped space, the tension coiling like smoke in the confined air. You sense it spreading, this erosion of trust, where stress transmutes camaraderie into suspicion, each man retreating into his mental bunker, the plane's interior a microcosm of fractured alliances that mirrors the broader fractures of war-torn alliances on the ground. In the historical weave of the 15th Air Force's Italian-based operations, where B-17s targeted the oil fields of Ploesti in daring low-level runs. Such internal rifts occasionally surfaced in debriefings, crews admitting to sociopathic lapses, temporary walls erected against the emotional barrage, a defense mechanism that preserved function at the cost of fellowship. Paranoia creeps in like condensation on the canopy, blurring the line between reality and reverie, where every anomalous hum from the engines ignites visions of failure. A misfire spiraling into catastrophe, the Wright Cyclone's faithful throb suddenly a deceitful murmur. You strain to listen, head cocked against the headset, the sound amplifying in your mind until it drowns the intercom's chatter. A solitary obsession that isolates even as it binds you to the machine's fate. The engineer, crawling through the bomb bay to check lines, returns with oil-smeared hands and a furrowed brow, his report laced with doubt that fuels the collective unease, turning routine maintenance into omens deciphered like ancient scrolls. Amid this, a fleeting thought arises from the quiet well of exasperation. With every creak heralding doom, perhaps the plane is merely complaining about its passengers, a weary host eager for solitude in the clouds, its groans a polite hint to disembark mid-flight. Such whimsy, emerging unforced from the shadows of strain, offers a momentary levity, a buffer against the deepening chasm where fear of mechanical betrayal mirrors fear of human frailty. Linking these spectral visitations to the war's inexorable machinery, where the strategic imperatives of the combined bomber offensive demanded unflinching precision from crews averaging just 25 years old, reveals how stress sculpted not just missions but men, forging resilience from the raw ore of vulnerability. Veterans from the 390th Bomb Group, who braved the flak-laden skies over Merseburg's synthetic fuel plants, later reflected in oral histories on how these ghosts manifested as heightened senses, paranoia honing vigilance into a survival tool that tipped scales in raids where losses exceeded 50%. You embody this duality now, the cockpit's dim glow casting long shadows that dance with your doubts. The talismans in your pocket a tactile mantra against the unraveling. The stress phrase but also refines, turning snapped words into catalysts for reconciliation, a shared cigarette post-landing, or a nod that mends the rift. The human spirit's quiet alchemy transmuting discord into deeper bonds. This internal haunting, while eroding the surface, unearths profound layers of endurance, a testament to the era's unyielding forge, where men emerged tempered, their post-war lives marked by a stoic grace that modern reflections might envy amid our own fragmented connections. The plane's frame, creaking under the strain of formation flying, becomes a metaphor for the psyche's burden, where holding together demands sacrificing pieces of self, the ghosts a reminder of costs paid in silent currency. As the target horizon sharpens, the cockpit's apparitions linger, not as conquerors, but as companions, their presence a subtle education in fortitude, echoing how those airmen navigated inner voids to claim the skies. In your immersion, this chapter whispers gratitude for contemporary anchors, relationships unfrayed by such extremes, honoring their legacy by cherishing the fragile webs we weave today. The ghosts persist, subtle as the vibration through your seat, turning the cockpit into a confessional where confessions go unspoken. The crew's shared hauntings a binding force that defies the isolation. A curse over a jammed gun diffuses into laughter, brittle yet genuine. The tensions release a valve against implosion, highlighting how humor, dark and unbidden, serves as salve. You ponder the irony in hushed reflection, with tempers flaring like faulty wiring. Perhaps the real enemy isn't the Luftwaffe, but the sparks within, short-circuiting the human circuit board in this flying enigma. Such insights, drawn from the quiet desperation of sustained peril, deepen the narrative's resonance, linking past trials to present understandings, where learning from their spectral battles fosters appreciation for the calm harbours we navigate now. In essence, these cockpit ghosts encapsulate the war's profound alchemy. Transmuting stress into strength, they're haunting a crucible where bonds, though strained, emerge unbreakable. The 452nd Bomb Group's accounts from Denethorpe detail how paranoia sharpened crews for the Turning Point raids of 1944. Their internal navigations pivotal to the offensive that grounded the Luftwaffe. As you dwell in their shadowed realm, the chapter invites empathy for the haunted, a gentle nudge toward valuing the unhaunted moments of our own era, where ghosts are metaphors, not companions in the night sky. The drone continues, the ghosts whisper on, but in their company, a quiet wisdom blooms, a legacy of endurance that soothes the soul across time. As the formation edges toward the invisible line where reconnaissance ends and reckoning begins, the mission's heart pulses into view, the bomb run, that straight and level gauntlet where vulnerability peaks and the fortress sheds its defensive guise, flying predictable as a moth to flame, defenseless against the swarming lights below. The intercom hums with the bombardier's steady countdown, his voice a thread of calm woven through the rising tension. As the plane aligns with the initial point, engines throttling back to a precise hum that seals your fate in uniformity. You brace in your station, the world narrowing to the bomb bay doors creaking open like jaws parting for a final breath. The payload, thousands of pounds of high explosives, hanging exposed, a dangling promise of destruction that mirrors your own precarious hold on the sky. The flak intensifies here, black bursts flowering closer, the air thickening with shrapnel's whisper, while fighters, sensing the moment's fragility, dart in like opportunistic scavengers, their tracers weaving a deadly net around the box. Relief flickers briefly as the call comes. Bombs away, the plane lurching upward, suddenly lighter, as if exhaling a burden long carried, the ordnance tumbling earthward in a silent cascade that belies the thunder to come. Yet, this unburdening lasts but a heartbeat, a fleeting illusion of ease before the race home unfurls, the return leg a mirror of the inbound terror, but laced with exhaustion's heavier veil, where every mile stretches longer under the weight of accumulated scars. The fortress, now relieved of its load, picks up speed, but the gauntlet reforms with vindictive precision. Flak batteries, recalibrated from the initial pass, hurl their barrages with renewed fury, the sky a minefield of exploding ink blots that rock the hull like a ship in storm-tossed seas. Fighters, undeterred by the formation's fire, loop back for another strike, their cannons chattering in bursts that ping off the wings or burrow deeper, fuel lines hissing in protest as leaks trail misty warnings. You swing your guns in weary arcs, hands aching from the recoil's relentless kick, the spent brass cascading at your feet like discarded promises, each near miss a miracle whispered against the odds that history records with clinical detachment. In raids like the one over Leipzig in 1944, where the 445th Bomb Group lost 25 planes in minutes, the homeward dash became a lottery of survival. Crews counting the seconds until the channel's safety, praying the engines held against the cumulative toll of holes and strain. The cost manifests in the empty slots around you, where planes that flew wing to wing now exist only as fading smoke trails or radio static, their absence a void that pulls at the formation like gravity's insidious tug. You glance sideways, the guilt a slow bloom in your chest, as the order to maintain speed overrides any impulse to circle back, the mission's momentum a tyrant that brooks no delay, leaving the stricken to their solitary descents. In the 8th Air Force's annals, during the Big Week offensive of February 1944, when over 1,000 bombers hammered aircraft factories across Germany, such losses, nearly 200 fortresses in 6 days, underscored the doctrine's merciless math. Press on, deliver the payload, return what remains, the individual subsumed in the greater calculus of attrition that ground the Luftwaffe to dust. Relief upon bombs away evaporates in the race's grind, the plane's lighter frame a double-edged gift. Faster, yes, but more buoyant in turbulence, bouncing through flak fields like a cork on angry waves, each jolt a reminder of fragility amplified by fatigue. Linking this climax to the war's broader symphony, whether strategic pounding of targets like synthetic oil plants in Merseburg, exacted payloads exceeding 4,000 tons in single operations, reveals how the bomb run encapsulated the campaign's essence. A momentary zenith of purpose amid prolonged peril, the release a catharsis tainted by the immediate pivot to evasion. The bombardier's Norden sight, that guarded secret of gyroscopic precision, aligns the drop with mechanical poetry, yet the human element, your pounding heart, the sweat beading under the mask, infuses it with raw vulnerability, the act not just tactical but existential, a defiance hurled at the earth below. You feel the lurch again in memory, the sudden ascent a brief euphoria, only to plunge back into the gauntlet's embrace, fighters nipping at the stragglers like hounds on a weakening herd, the race home a test of wills where every engine cough spells potential disaster. The personal toll weaves through it all, the bomb's departure lightening the plane but not the soul, where the knowledge of devastation wrought below, factories crumbling, lives extinguished in the inferno, lingers like smoke in the slipstream, a moral residue that the rush of survival barely washes away. In reflections from crews of the 303rd Bomb Group, who endured the Hells Angels moniker through repeated hammerings over Wilhelmshaven, the post-drop race often blurred into a haze of adrenaline and regret. The cost clear in the formation's ragged return, planes limping with feathered props or holed fuselages, their crews forever marked by the arithmetic of who made it and who didn't. You count the miles inwardly, the channel a distant promise, the race a meditation on endurance, where desperation crafts its own quiet insights. With bombs gone and the plane lighter, perhaps if you fall now, you'll float longer. A prolonged goodbye to the clouds that have been both cradle and cage. A whimsical extension in the face of gravity's pull. This high-stakes pivot, from delivery to dash, underscores the offensive's inexorable drive, where the combined bomber offensive's architects balance bomb loads against fuel reserves, optimizing for destruction at the expense of agility. The Fortress's max speed of 280 miles per hour, a snail's pace against the 400 of pursuing 109s. The race home, fraught with the same perils that scarred the approach, demanded a fortitude that transcended the physical, turning pilots into stoic navigators of fate, their corrections minute yet monumental, steering through the storm with hands steadied by necessity's cold grip. In the broader narrative, as chronicled in the US Strategic Bombing Survey, these runs crippled German production, reducing aircraft output by 30% in key months, but at a human price that statistics barely capture. The radio's final plea, the chute's bloom too late, the empty bunk back at base. As the coastline nears, the race's end a faint glimmer, the climax's residue settles, a mix of elation and exhaustion that deepens the mission's imprint, honoring the airman's unyielding push through the gauntlet. You exhale, the mask warming slightly, the wry undercurrent lingering. In shedding the bombs, you've lightened the load but not the ledger. The race home a reminder that survival is but a deferred debt, paid in increments of luck and loss. This chapter of release and retreat invites contemplation on modern rushes. Deadlines met only to face the return's burdens, fostering empathy for those who race the skies, their legacy a whisper of resilience that soothes contemporary tempests. The engines throb on, the void receding, but the cost's echo persists, a quiet tribute to endurance's price. In reflection, the bomb runs crescendo, and the ensuing sprint encapsulate war's dual nature. Purpose fulfilled in destruction, survival chased in flight, the fortress a vessel for both. The 452nd Bomb Group's raids on Poltava, shuttling between bases in a bold extension of range, exemplified this, their homeward legs a testament to grit amid dwindling fuel and mounting wounds. You carry it forward, the lurch of release a metaphor for burdens dropped yet shadows retained. The race a bridge to gratitude for eras where escapes are not so literal, where the void's pull is metaphorical, allowing room for healing unscarred by such literal fires. The sky lightens ahead, the race winding down, but in its wake, a profound appreciation blooms for the fragile art of pressing on. As the flak's distant echoes dissolve into the horizon's haze, and the last fighter peels away like a reluctant shadow conceding defeat, the navigator's voice cuts through the static with a simplicity that borders on sacred, enemy airspace clear, a proclamation that uncoils the tension knotted in your chest, allowing breath to flow freer, if only for a moment. The white cliffs of Dover emerge then, glowing faintly in the dawn's tentative light, rising from the sea like ancient sentinels etched from chalk and memory, their pale faces a beacon that tugs at something primal within, whispering of solid ground after hours adrift in the ether's merciless embrace. You lean toward the viewport, eyes drinking in the sight, the coastline unfolding as a promised shore where the channel's grey expanse meets land's unyielding certainty, a boundary that separates the realm of peril from the illusion of safety. The crew exhales as one, a collective sigh that fogs the masks briefly, the plane's wounded frame seeming to relax with you, its engines softening from a defiant roar to a murmuring promise of home, carrying you westward on wings scarred but unbroken. This fleeting respite, carved from the mission's aftermath, unfolds in small rituals that bind the survivors in quiet communion, the air within the fortress thickening with the scent of tobacco as someone, perhaps the co-pilot, hands steadier now, lights a cigarette. The flames flicker a tiny defiance against the cold that still lingers in your bones. The smoke curls lazily in the cockpit, passed hand to hand like a sacrament, each inhale a stolen luxury after the deprivation of the run, where even breath was rationed against the mask's seal. You take your turn, the warmth spreading through your lungs like a balm, the nicotine a gentle haze that blurs the edges of exhaustion, allowing fragments of relief to surface amid the residue of loss. Historically, for crews returning to bases like Thorpe Abbotts in Suffolk, where the 100th Bomb Group's bloody 100th moniker was earned through staggering attrition, this crossing marked a threshold. After 10 grueling hours aloft, the cliffs signaled not just geographical reprieve, but psychological, a momentary erasure of the arithmetic that saw formations depart with 36 planes and return with 20. The empty revetments on the tarmac silent witnesses to the void left behind. The engines drone, once a harbinger of strain, transforms in this passage into a soothing cadence, a rhythmic assurance that propels you toward the familiar patchwork of English fields, their greens a stark contrast to the monochromatic hell of the target zone. You savor the quiet that descends, broken only by the occasional crackle of the intercom or the faint whistle of wind through a fresh puncture in the hull. The silence a velvet shroud that muffles the mission's clamor, inviting introspection on the fragile thread that pulled you through. In this interlude, as the coastline sharpens into detail, fishing villages dotting the shore like forgotten pearls, the shared smoke becomes a bridge, linking you to your crewmates in unspoken gratitude, each puff a nod to endurance, a ritual that honors the absent without words, turning survival into a communal rite. The cliffs, rising majestic and unmoved by the war's tumult, evoke a sense of destiny fulfilled, their enduring presence a counterpoint to the transience of your aerial odyssey, where bases like Poddington or Kimbolton awaited with hot meals and bunks that promised rest, if only the ghost permitted sleep. Yet, beneath this veneer of solace, a subtle undercurrent tugs at your thoughts, born from the quiet recesses where exhaustion crafts its wry commentaries. With a cigarette lit after dodging death's grasp, perhaps this is the ultimate indulgence, a final relaxation before the reaper claims his due, the smoke a fleeting veil against the inevitable tally waiting on the ground. Such musings drift unhurried, emerging like vapor from the embers of desperation, adding a layer of poignant absurdity to the relief that washes over you. The cliffs now fully in view, their white faces a canvas for projections of home, perhaps a pub in Norwich, or a letter from across the Atlantic, simple anchors in a world upended by the call to arms. The plane descends gradually, the altimeter unwinding like a clock reversing time. The English coast a threshold where the mission's weight begins to lift, though the scars, both visible on the fortress and invisible within, linger as testaments to the crossing's cost. Linking this momentary haven to the broader narrative of the air war, where the 8th Air Force's relentless push from 1942 onward saw crews cycle through bases like Snetterton Heath, returning battered from incursions that chipped away at the Reich's industrial heart, reveals how these returns forged a resilient optimism amid cumulative loss. The cliffs of Dover, immortalized in wartime propaganda as symbols of Britain's unyielding spirit, became personal milestones for American airmen, marking the shift from predator-prey dynamics over enemy soil to the relative sanctuary of Allied skies, where escort fighters might finally appear like belated guardians. You feel the transition viscerally, the tension easing from your shoulders as the land draws nearer, the shared cigarette a micro-ritual that underscores human tenacity, a spark of normalcy reclaimed from the abyss, echoing how, in the face of over 26,000 airmen lost in European theatres, those who crossed back carried forward a quiet fortitude that shaped victory's foundation. The quiet deepens, the first real hush in hours, where the engine's promise of home drowns the ghost for a spell, allowing space for gratitude to bloom. A nod to the ground crew awaiting with patches and praise, or the simple miracle of solid earth underfoot. In this passage, as the coastline's details sharpen, waves lapping at the base like gentle absolutions, the respite invites reflection on endurance's subtle art, where survival isn't triumph but persistence, a lesson woven into the fabric of those returns, honouring the airman's legacy by contrasting with modern traversals, where journeys end without such existential stakes, fostering appreciation for the unscarred paths we tread today. The smoke dissipates, The cliffs loom larger, the descent a gentle glide toward renewal, though the war's shadow trails like a persistent wake. As the wheels prepare to kiss the runway, the promised land materializes not as utopia, but as reprieve. The English coast a threshold where the mission's echoes fade into the hum of base life, the shared exhale a bridge to tomorrow's uncertainties. You savor it, the quieter balm that soothes the soul's abrasions. The cigarette's glow a fleeting star against the dawn, turning desperation's edge into a quiet wisdom that resonates, inviting empathy for those who sought land after tempests. Their crossings a testament to the human spirit's unquenchable light. The land rises to meet you, the respite a whisper of peace in war's symphony, a moment to cherish amid the inexorable cycle. The cliffs, steadfast and luminous, embody destiny's gentle hand, guiding the weary homeward, their presence a silent ode to resilience, where the race's end births not just survival, but a deeper knowing of loss, of luck, of the fragile beauty in returning whole. In this immersion, as the ground nears, the chapter's essence unfolds a gratitude for present harbours, safe from such celestial trials, honouring the airman's quiet valour that paved the skies for calmer flights. The engines throttle back, the coast embraces, the promised land a fleeting haven in the storm's wake. The wheels kiss the runway with a screech that echoes like a final protest. The B-17 shuddering to a halt, as if exhaling its last breath after the long ordeal, the scarred fuselage settling onto the tarmac with the weight of unspoken burdens. You climb out slowly, legs unsteady on the solid ground that feels alien after hours suspended in the ether's grasp. The gravel crunching under your boots, like brittle memories fracturing underfoot. The air here is different, thicker, laced with the earthy tang of England, rather than the sterile chill of altitude. And as you glance back at the fortress, its skin pocked with fresh perforations from shrapnel's indifferent artistry, you count the holes silently, each one a testament to near misses that could have rewritten fate with a single twist of trajectory. The ground crew swarms like dutiful shadows, their tools clanging in rhythmic urgency, patching what can be mended while the deeper wounds, the absent planes that should have taxied alongside, linger as voids in the lineup, empty revetments staring back like accusatory eyes in the fading light. Stepping into the mess hall later, the clamour of utensils and murmured voices washes over you like a muted tide, but the room's true language is one of absence, where chairs stand vacant at tables once crowded with banter and bravado, their emptiness a silent elegy to those who didn't cross the threshold back. You slide into your seat, the meal before you, a tasteless slurry of rations warmed to lukewarm indifference, stirred absently with a fork that feels heavier than it should, each bite mechanical, flavour lost to the numbness that clings like frost on your tongue. The 25 mission tour, that arbitrary benchmark etched into every airman's psyche by Army Air Force's decree, looms over the room like a spectral judge, its promise of rotation home a cruel lottery where fewer than 1 in 5 drew the winning ticket in the early brutal years, the rest claimed by the sky's insatiable hunger during offensives that saw groups like the 100th lose over half their strength in months of unrelenting sorties. You stare at the empty spots, places where laughter once cut through the tension, now hollow echoes that amplify the quiet grief, a reminder that survival isn't triumph, but a deferred sentence. The tour a gauntlet, where each completion etched deeper lines into souls already weathered by the wind. The silence in the hall isn't absolute. It's punctuated by the clink of spoons and the occasional forced chuckle. But beneath it, runs an undercurrent of destiny's quiet decree, where the war's machinery grinds on without pause, assigning bunks to new faces while the ghosts of the lost hover in the periphery, their absence a weight that bends the air. You ponder it over your cooling coffee, the steam rising like fleeting spirits, the ritual of eating an anchor in the disorientation of return, where the adrenaline's ebb leaves a hollow that guilt rushes to fill. The what-ifs of formations held, comrades left to spiral alone, their radios fading into nothingness as the box pressed forward. In the historical ledger of the 8th Air Force, where operations like Big Week in 1944 hammered the Luftwaffe's backbone at the cost of hundreds of crews, this post-mission hush became a ritual of reckoning, survivors tallying not just aircraft, but the human voids, their resilience a quiet forge where loss tempered rather than broke, turning personal sorrow into the fuel for tomorrow's ascent. Linking this muted aftermath to the broader tapestry of endurance, where bases like Thorpe Abbott's buzzed with the cycle of departure and depleted return, reveals how the empty chairs symbolize the war's inexorable toll, each vacancy a chapter closed in the narrative of the strategic bombing campaign that ultimately starved the Nazi war machine of fuel and fighters. You sit there, fork idle, the meal's blandness a metaphor for the dulled senses that follow the storm, where victory tastes of ash and survival carries the aftertaste of sacrifice. The hall's dim lights cast long shadows, mirroring the elongated doubts that stretch into the night, where sleep evades like an elusive ally, the mind replaying the radio's last crackle, or the sight of a shoot failing to bloom. Yet, in this desolation, a subtle musing emerges from the quiet depths. With so many chairs empty, perhaps the mess hall has grown roomier, a final courtesy from the departed, granting the survivors space to breathe amid the crowding ghosts, a whimsical reprieve in the face of accumulating voids. The evening deepens outside, the bass settling into its nocturnal rhythm. But within, the silence after the storm descends like a heavy curtain. The engine's distant hush from the maintenance sheds a faint echo of the roar that carried you through. You step outside eventually, the cool air a gentle slap against flush skin, the cigarette lit with trembling fingers, casting a glow that dances like a solitary firefly in the dusk. The smoke curls upward, a transient spiral that mirrors the thoughts unwinding in your mind. The wonder if wholeness will ever return, if the fragments left behind in the sky can be pieced back, or if the tour's end, should it come, will bring not relief, but a stranger's reflection in the mirror. In the accounts of veterans from the 384th Bomb Group, who returned from the hell of Luna's oil refineries with formations halved, this post-landing hush became a crucible for reflection, where the silence amplified inner voices, forging a stoicism that carried them through to VE Day, their survival a quiet victory over the entropy that claimed so many. This afterglow of stillness, where the world's clamour recedes to a whisper, invites a meditative pause, the base's lights twinkling like grounded stars, a counterpoint to the celestial perils left behind. You inhale the smoke deeply, the burn a minor anchor in the drifting calm, pondering how this silence, though deafening in its completeness, offers a space for gratitude, a nod to the ground beneath your feet, unyielding unlike the treacherous air. The war's machinery grinds on, new missions looming like inevitable tides, but in this interlude, the empty chairs and hushed halls become teachers of presence, urging appreciation for the moments seized from chaos, a legacy that whispers across generations, contrasting with contemporary silences filled with distractions, where true quiet is a luxury rather than a haunting. The cigarette burns low, the storm's echo fading, leaving a profound empathy for those who navigated such returns, their fortitude a gentle light in history's shadowed corridors. The night envelops the base, the silence a velvet cloak that soothes the day's abrasions, allowing fragments of hope to glimmer like embers in ash. You crush the cigarette underheel, the spark extinguishing with a hiss. The action a micro-ritual of closure amid the open-ended saga of war, where tomorrow's briefing awaits with its fresh maps and mandates. Yet, in this suspended breath, the promised land of the coast feels distant. The mess hall's voids a reminder that home is not just a place but a state reclaimed inch by inch from loss's grasp. The silence deepens, a companion rather than a foe, inviting reflection on resilience's subtle art, where the airmen's quiet reckonings forge paths to peace, their legacy a whisper of strength for those who listen in the still hours, fostering gratitude for presence unmarred by such spectral counts. The base sleeps, the storm past, but in its wake a quiet wisdom blooms, a tribute to endurance that lingers like smoke in the air. As dawn hints at the horizon, the silence after the storm becomes a bridge to renewal, the empty chairs a canvas for memory's gentle strokes, where you bend and determination intertwine in the human narrative. You walk back, the gravels crunch a rhythmic affirmation of solidity, the night's hush a balm that heals in increments, honoring the past's shadows by embracing the light ahead. The war continues, but in this pause, a profound connection forms. To those who sat in similar halls, their fortitude a beacon that illuminates our own quieter battles, turning history's lessons into personal solace. The silence envelops, a final whisper of peace in the cycle's turn. As the B-17 scars fade into the twilight of memory, we've journeyed through skies of fire and frost, where courage danced with despair above a war-torn world. Let the echoes of those brave souls, 10 men in their metal cocoon, linger softly, like stars above a quiet field. Release your day's burdens now. Let your shoulders sink, your breath slow, as the gentle hum of their engines cradles you towards sleep's embrace. If your eyes still hold the night, share your thoughts below. Where are you, and what lingers in your heart? Tomorrow, another tale awaits, whispering through the dark to guide you into dreams. For now, close your eyes, drift with the clouds, and let history's gentle lessons carry you to rest. Sleep well under the wings of the past until the next story calls.